Russia is gearing up for its Victory Day military parade this Friday, marking the 80th anniversary of the Soviet defeat of Nazi Germany. Vladimir Putin has made the event a key part of his nationalist narrative as he pursues his invasion of Ukraine. More than 24 foreign leaders are due in Moscow, including Brazil's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Chinese President Xi Jinping, who's in Russia on a state visit. For more, I'm joined on set by Leela Jacinto from our Foreign Affairs desk. Leela, as we mentioned, Xi Jinping really the special guest at today's proceedings. What's the message there?
Oh, this is replete with messaging. As you mentioned, he's on a state visit to Moscow. And Xi Jinping and Russian President Putin met yesterday at a sumptuous ceremony in the Kremlin St. George's Hall. The optics of this messaging displayed on Russian state TV is, this is very much an alliance of old partners, trustworthy neighbors that are united in the face of chaos. This comes at a time when the Trump administration in the White House is not really displaying a lot of conformity with its allies and does not, appear to be supporting its allies. Now, alliances are another big theme over here, because there are displays of a lack of unity on the side of the West as well. One of the other guests who will be present at the military parade today is Slovakia's Robert Fico. Fico is known for his close to Russia policies, and his attendance here is in defiance of the EU top diplomat who called on EU members not to attend today's events in Moscow today. So what we're going to have in Moscow today is we're going to see a lot of trumping up of the alliances. China, it must be noted, was on the side of the Allies during World War II. It fought with the Allies against an imperial Japan. This is often overlooked in the West. This will be mentioned in Moscow, along with a mention of what these new alliances bring into a changing world order. So at the end of the meeting between Xi Jinping and Putin yesterday, there was a very lengthy joint statement where the two countries seemed to be falling in consensus on their positions. If you remember, when the Ukraine war broke out, when Russia launched its full-scale invasion in 2022, China officially maintained a neutral position. Over the past 3 years, that is noticeably changing. The two leaders have met several times since the Ukraine war broke out. Xi Jinping's meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky lacks the sort of warmth and the convergence that we see. And this joint statement yesterday talked about a lot of bilateral trade as well as boosting economic ties, trade and investment between the two countries by 2030, and this is important.
And speaking of trade and investment, Leela, these celebrations come just a day after Ukrainian lawmakers approved that mineral deal with the United States. There's an economic aspect to the war in Ukraine as well, isn't there?
Very much so. I mean, this long-awaited deal was overwhelmingly approved by Ukrainian lawmakers on Thursday. Now, initially the deal was thought to be a sort of a quid pro quo for the U.S. in military aid given to Ukraine during the war over the past 3 years. This was renegotiated. And so what U.S. and Ukrainian politicians are saying is that this marks the U.S.'s economic commitment to Ukraine. And this is very much in keeping with the Trump administration's policies. His foreign policy is really driven by economic incentives much more than security guarantees. And, China is also a very important player over here, because among the gatherings in Moscow today, we are going to see Brazil's Lula da Silva, as you mentioned. We are also going to see the leader of Vietnam. Now, this is a country that was especially hit by Trump's trade tariffs, which he imposed on Liberation Day. And China, of course, is portraying itself as the one country that has thrown an economic lifeline to Russia, which is facing tough sanctions from the West since the Ukraine war. And it's also showing that it can fight until the end with these US tariffs. So the messaging here is one of global leaders from the global south that are positioning itself to show a sort of a more egalitarian approach to a global economy that has been dominated by the US dollar. So this is all about messaging and showing an alternative to the West, even though it was the US and Britain 80 years ago that played a major role in this alliances. Those two powers are not likely to be mentioned.
Yeah, the big political shifts are definitely on display today. We'll be following those Victory Day parade celebrations. Leela, thank you so much for that.